Welcome to this edition of Consciousness Raising Online. And for those who are seeing this live, it is so nice. I just thank you, Dusty, for putting me on the front page. That is so cool. So when you just come to Dusty.com, you can see our logo and click on it and watch our program. Today, the subject, which may sound kind of weird to some people, it says stolen land might have belonged to your family. For a long time I've been saying that uh, in going after reparations, uh, it's not just going after a check. Some people believe that's all it is. Some people have understood that it's about resources as well. It's also about correcting history. And one of the things that some years ago I realized is that, you know, in a way, not in a way, reparations is compensation and restitution. And the restitution part is really deep when you consider this. We have had so much land stolen from our families and relatives over the years that it's important that we learn our history, learn our family history. Now, some of us, and virtually all of us, most of us are just one generation or two generations up from the South. But one of the things that a lot of us, particularly in my age group, my generation, many of us can recall hearing stories about how some relative had to leave the South, had to leave their home uh, because they were targeted. We also know of stories where we had family members who were killed. Some were lynched, some were killed in different ways. And a lot of times it involved commerce or the family wealth. Now, one of the things they like to put in in his history books is saying, well, people that were lynched were accused of sexual crimes, of raping white women and stuff like that. That nonsense that Ida B. Wells Barnett documented was not true 90% of the time. But she also documented that a lot of the lynchings and murders had to do with getting land and businesses from people. So I wanted to highlight just a few cases where land was stolen from folks. And I'm going to mention names, family names. And so if any of you who watch this at any point in time in the future, and you hear your family name or relatives that you recognize the family name of relatives, and it fits the state that's mentioned, you may want to talk to your family members and find out, was this a relative that's directly related to you? Because they may have stolen the land from your family. And see, we don't need to have the reparations whole thing solved in terms of that. That's something that can be pursued now, particularly if you know your family history. And see, they hate for us to recall or pull up the facts of stuff like that. The first one, in fact, I'm going to start with my mother's home state. This was in Birmingham, Kentucky. And today, Birmingham, Kentucky, lies under a floodway that was created in the 1940s. But at the start of the 20th century, which would have been 1900, it was a thriving tobacco town with a predominantly black population. Now, how many of us knew that? And like I say, that's my mother's home state. I even went to school a year down there and used to go down there when we were children every summer. But I never knew that. Birmingham, Kentucky. Today it lies under a floodway. In other words, in the 1940s, they flooded the town and made it a way for flood water to go. But at 1900, it was a thriving tobacco town with a predominantly black population. It was also a battleground during a 5-year siege by white marauders called night riders. And I remember hearing about night riders when I was a child. My grandfather used to talk about the night riders. Now, on the night of March 8th, 1908, about 100 armed whites on horseback. That's why they call them night riders, because they would come through on the horses. They raided the black part of the town. They shot 7 people, killed 3 of them, and it's documented where 14 cases, black landowners were driven out of the town of Birmingham. In this case, they lost more than 60 acres of farmland and 21 city lots to whites. Because when they ran them out of town, then they would have what they call a sheriff's sale, and they would buy them for, pennies on the dollar. So there's a case where they stole half the town. Because think about it, if you had 21 city lots and 60 acres of farmland, man, what could you do with that? Now that was Birmingham, Kentucky in 1908. Later that same year, in Hickman, Kentucky, this was in October of 1908, around 50 white men surrounded the home of a black farmer in Hickman, Kentucky. His name was David Walker. Now, this is not the David Walker that had the David Walker letter. This just happened to be David Walker, right? Now, here's what they did to him. They burned his house down after he shot at them and refused their orders to come out. See, they had sent him messages and told him to leave town. And he said, I'm not leaving. I live here. This is where I live. He had a big farm. So now they set fire to his house when he refused to come out. He ran out of the house with 4 children and his wife, who was carrying a baby in her arms. The mob shot all of them. They wounded 3 children and killed him, his wife, and 2 of the children. His oldest son died in the house in the flames. Nobody was ever charged with the killings. And the surviving children were denied access to the land that their father had owned. Now, he had 2.5 acres farm. And what happened was that they simply added that property to the property of their white neighbor. They just took the land and deeded it over to his neighbor. And then the neighbor soon sold it to another man whose daughter owns the undeveloped land today. Did you hear that I just said? Yeah. He stole the land, deeded it to his neighbor. His neighbor sold the land to another white man, and that man's daughter owns the undeveloped land to this day. So now Walker, that's the name, and so you want to find out if you're kin to any Walkers uh, from Kentucky, in particular Hickman, Kentucky, because the children, all of them didn't die. They had to leave. They went somewhere. They just took their land. It gets worse. Now they just killed that man and his wife and his children. Let's go to Ocoee, Florida. Ocoee, Florida. Now, what happened down there was called the Election Day Massacre, or the Ocoee Massacre, either one. What happened was that black folks, this was in this is in 1920, and black folks were preparing to register to vote. And no, I'm sorry, let me take it back. They had registered to vote and they were preparing to actually vote. So now the a mob of white men, they were preparing to stop them from voting. So they had laid out stuff. They had planned it all out. They were going to surround the voting, the building where the voting went on, and they were going to intimidate black folks who came up to vote. Well, this one man, he fixed them. He got there before they did, and he registered to vote. No, he was already registered. He managed to get in there before they got there, and so he voted. So he came out having voted, and then white folks went crazy. So they ended up attacking the black folks, the black community there, and ran them out of town. Let me see. They ended up taking over 330 acres plus 48 city lots that were owned by 18 black families. Let me repeat that. 18 black families owned a total of 330 acres plus 48 city lots. And they attacked the community. Many just left. Some got killed. Some of them who managed to not get killed and didn't leave, a few of them basically were forced to sell their land. Uh, mm, the sell or die. So they sold their land to the white folks and left. In 2001, the land lost by the 18 Ocoee families, not including the buildings on it now, was assessed by tax officials at more than $4.2 million. See, don't think that this is minor money. It's not minor money. Okay? They took what belonged to folks. Now, that one, I don't have their names, but again, if you can trace your family, and you got family going back to Ocoee, Florida, and if they left there all of a sudden, you want to dig deeper into that because they may have left because they were forced. Let's go to Pierce City, Missouri. Pierce City. There, over 1,000 armed whites burned down 5 black-owned houses and killed 4 black people in 1901, and within 4 days, all of the town's 129 black people left, never to return. Uh, Now, it was later documented the case of at least 9 Pierce City people who lost a total of 30 acres of farmland and 10 city lots. And of course, that land was, and the city lots were bought by white people in Pierce City at what they say bargain basement prices. That means they got it for pennies on a dollar. But now here's the thing. They intentionally attacked those black folks using guns and ropes and chased them out of town, literally. And the torch, right. With guns, rope, and a torch. And then they call it a race riot. It wasn't no race riot, it was a race attack. And they say Will Godley and his grandfather were lynched. That was in Pierce City, Missouri. Said they ran them out of town, never to return. It was 129 black people, men, women, and children, ran them out. We need to find, well, I don't know, well, maybe some folks who have, you trace your family and find out they're from Missouri and find out did any of them ever live in Pierce City? And did they leave Pierce City unwillingly at some point? Might be some of that land. You see? Let's go to Mississippi. Holmes County, Mississippi. Now there in Holmes County, Mississippi, during the 1950s and 60s, there was a Chevy dealer named Norman Weathersby. He was the only dealer in the area. And he required black farmers to put up their land as security for small loans for farm equipment and pickup trucks to work their farms. Okay? Now, he had an accomplice. His name was William E. Strider, Strider. He ran the local Farmers Home Administration, the FHA. That was a government agency that was supposed to help the farmers. In fact, Martin Luther King, it's a great quote that put on Facebook and YouTube that I ran across. It's like 1 minute, but Martin Luther King talks about how the FHA was instrumental in giving away land for free to white people, and didn't just give them the land, they gave them the tools to work with and help to do all of that. And they wouldn't give it to black people at all. It's a real deep quote because he breaks it down. He said, ooh. But now, in this case, William Strider, who ran a local Farmers Home Administration, that was the credit lifeline for many Southern farmers. Now, what he would do, he would delay releasing the operating loans to the black folks. So that's what they used in order to pay for the equipment that they borrowed from Weathersby. And when they missed their payments, he took their land. Ain't that slick? So now, when he died, Weathersby died in 1973. He left more than 700 acres of land to his family. So he did pretty well taking the land away from black folks, didn't he? Weathersby. So again, this is in Holmes County, Mississippi. So you want to check your family history, see if anybody in your family ever had farmland in Holmes County, Mississippi. I need to check it because my father's father and his family came from Mississippi. I don't know what county it was, but I need to check that myself. I don't know what he did or his. I don't know what my great great grandfather did for a living, but it may have been farming. I don't know. Okay. Now let's go to Sweetwater, Alabama. Sweetwater, Alabama. Now this is in 1964. In 1964, the state of Alabama sued Lamont Williams and Lawrence Hudson, claiming they were cousins, claiming that they did not rightfully own two 40-acre farms. Their family had worked in Sweetwater, Alabama for nearly 100 years. Interestingly enough, both of them had 40 acres, okay? And their families had worked those farms for almost 100 years. So now the state of Alabama was trying to take the land. They took them to court. And at first, the judge urged the state to drop its suit, saying it would result in a severe injustice. But the state refused, saying it wanted income from timber on the land. And all of a sudden, the judge changed his mind and ruled in favor of the state. Now, this was in 1964. This wasn't way, way back. And so the tax records and deeds, which were the family had gotten a hold of and had to, once they appealed it, it documented that the family had owned the land since an ancestor had bought the property on January 3rd, 1874. 90 years before that, he had bought the land. The records also showed the family paid property taxes on the farms from the mid-1950s all the way up until the time that the state took the land. They took that land. 40 acres, two of them, 80 acres, took that land. And it wasn't back in ancient history, it was in 1964. Okay. Now let's go to Lincoln County, Mississippi. In Lincoln County, Mississippi, there was a group of farmers. They called themselves the White Caps. And, you know, all of them weren't always called the Ku Klux Klan. They were called, some places they were called the Red Shirts, and in this area they were called the White Caps. And they were angry because the black farmers were being very successful. And so they used violence and intimidation to force the black people off their land. The Brookhaven Leader newspaper reported at the time, in 1903, that Eli Hilson of Lincoln County, Mississippi, got a warning on November 18th when Whitecaps shot up his house just hours after his new baby was born. Hilson said, "I'm not going nowhere." A month later, he was 39 years old, same age as Martin Luther King and Malcolm X when they were killed. He was shot in the head as he drove his buggy towards his farm. The horse continued to trot home, delivering his body home to his wife named Hannah. Hmm. Can you imagine? Can you imagine that? Now, she tried to raise their 11 children by herself and worked the 74-acre farm. Wow, that's they killed her husband. She got 11 children, but they got that 74-acre farm, you know. So they tried to work that farm, and eventually it was foreclosed on 2 years later, 1905. And now here's what's so ugly. That 74-acre farm was sold to S.P. Oliver, a member of the County Board of Supervisors, for $439. Today, that property is assessed at quite a bit more. At least $61,000 minimum. Wow. See, I wonder what happened to those 11 children and Hannah. Their name was Hilson, Hilson. Hilson had 11 children. This was Lincoln County, Mississippi. You see, there's some Hilsons, and hopefully somebody either related to the Hilson or named Hilson will at some point get a chance to watch and hear this program, this presentation. And maybe, it's not beyond possibility. They may say, you know what? My uncle, he might be one of those 11 children. Of course, nobody was ever charged with killing Eli Hilson. All right, we're going to Jasper County, Mississippi now. In Jasper County, Mississippi, the Ku Klux Klan was very busy there, and they were resentful that black people were buying and profiting from the land, and they regularly attacked black-owned farms and burned houses and lynched black farmers and chased the black landowners away. On the night of September 10th, 1932, did what they did. In a town called Paulding, Mississippi, they torched the courthouse in Paulding. Why they did this? The property records for the eastern half of the county, which was then predominantly black, the property records were stored in that courthouse in Paulding. The records for the predominantly white western half of the county were in another courthouse miles away from Paulding. The door to the Paulding courthouse's safe, which protected the records, was found, unlocked and open, with most of the records burned to ashes. Now, all of a sudden, it became conveniently unclear who owned most of that land in eastern Jasper County. Did y'all hear what I just said? They burnt the records, the property records. In December of 1937, 5 years later, the Masonite Corporation, and y'all know, you've probably heard of Masonite. It was a wood products company and one of the largest landowners in the area, was granted a cleared title for 9,581 acres of land, which has since yielded millions of dollars in natural gas timber, and oil. Now, from the few property records that remain, uh, most of that land was acquired after the black folks were driven off the land by the KKK. And at least 850,000 barrels of oil have been pumped from this property, according to the Petroleum Technology Transfer Council. Today, that land is owned by International Paper Corp, which bought it from Masonite in 1988. See, now that's some deep stuff, because you're not talking about no penny ante, farmland. They worked that. They worked the hell out of that land and made much, much, much money off the oil, the timber, that's the trees. Again, need to find out if your people were ever in Jasper County, Mississippi, and in particular around Paulding. Wow. Now I'm almost finished because I gotta mention this one. This one is so deep. They didn't just take a little bit of land. They took the whole town. This is the only documented coup d'etat that ever took place on American soil. I know you probably heard the term coup, C-O-U-P. The whole phrase, which is French, is coup d'etat. And that's when people literally take the land and run the government, take over the government. What happened was 400 people, well, it was a mob. They were very upset with the black folks. They had just elected a local government 2 days before. And predominantly black folks and white Republicans, because this was before the changeover with Republicans. And so they banded together, the mob, led by a former congressman, and they had given Alexander Manley an ultimatum. He ran a newspaper there. And he told them, he was the editor-in-chief, they told him, destroy your newspaper and leave town forever, or we'll wreck it for you. It was called the Daily Record. So he just disappeared, and they came and they burned the Daily Record down. November 10th, 1898, in Wilmington, North Carolina. Then they assaulted the black folks. By sundown that day, they had destroyed the newspaper, and as many as 60 black people had been murdered, and some were mostly black. They did kill some of the Republican whites. And the local government, which was 2 days old, had been overthrown and replaced by white supremacists. They literally took the folks who were the elected officials, put them on a train, and rode them out of town. Yeah. You see that headline? Seized the city of Wilmington. Seized the city. Took it over. Wilmington, North Carolina. And as far as I've been able to determine, that has never been straightened out. It's been a continuous, same people dealing with that. Ms. Drea say, I've been to Mississippi only once in 1993. I have no desire to go back. Oh, wow. Again, here's another situation. To look up your family history, learn your family history, because you may find out you got relatives who once might have lived in Wilmington, North Carolina, and find out why they left. See? See, all of that's part of the reparations process. See, there's documentable situations that we can look into where this is part of the restitution part. See, restitution means you pay what is owed, you know? And so we don't know how many of us have family members who were lynched or had or run out of town and had their land stolen, their businesses stolen. Yeah. So we need to do that. That's why we need to learn our family history. Learn our family history. So that concludes today's presentation, which is stolen land might have belonged to your family. And you never really know, do you? That's why we got to find out. I'm going to close out with my favorite saying, which is no justice, no peace, no love, KNOW.